From the nation's capital.
Warped, distorted, and defiled the American story with deceptions, falsehoods, and lies. There is no better example than the New York Times totally discredited 1619 Project. This project rewrites American history to teach our children that we were founded on the principle of oppression, not freedom. Nothing could be further from the truth. America's founding set in motion the unstoppable chain of events that abolished slavery, secured civil rights, defeated communism and fascism, and built the most fair, equal, and prosperous nation in human history.
Thank you, Anderson. Mr. Vice President, I look out over my Biden sign in my front yard, and I see a sea of Trump flags and yard signs.
You were right there running the campaign 4 years ago today. Looking at the poll numbers now as objectively as you can, as compared to the numbers you were looking at 4 years ago today, how do you think the president's reelect looks?
I think the team's done a great job. When I look at these numbers in the crosstabs, when I drill down on them, I think the president's got not just a great shot. I think he will be the winner on November 3rd. I think the campaign's totally focused. I think Biden is a cipher. He can't draw a crowd. So I think right now that I think the campaign's doing great. The president's doing great. I see a victory on November 3rd. And I was the first guy to tell me he was going to win back in August of 2016.
Industry, chicken and poultry, and all the manure, quite frankly, that is a consequence of chickens. And so it's polluting the Chesapeake Bay. What we found out, we've invested a lot of money, we found out you can pelletize this and take out the methane, so you're in a position where you can use that fertilizer without the damage that was being done before. The same way with horse manure and cow manure and pig manure.
It's pelletized. What? You cannot make this up. It's pelletized.
I had to add that.
The head is so genius, so vish. Okay, you're in the war room. You're in the war room. It's Friday, the 18th of September, year of our Lord 2020. I think we got 46 in a wake up, but that's just a signpost. What I was saying last night. Forget all these polls. The polls don't show something important. Who's voting on game day? That's what counts. That's the real election. That's the legitimate election. Who votes on game day? We're live from the nation's capital. No siege started yesterday either. I think they've waved that off because of the bad optics. Pelletized. What is he talking? He's like a foreman at Tyson's or something. I love the foreman at Tyson's. I want the foreman at Tyson's to know on that level of granularity, but I don't want to talk about chicken, the pelletized. It's pelletized. And he has no earthly. Here's the thing. This is why it's Sundowner and he's got dementia. They can remember back to when he was told that years ago, right? As a Delaware guy going around, Delaware is actually a quite rural state. Besides the global headquarters for the world corporations, and it's really not headquarters. It's the post office box, the drop box in the friendly federal court, right there in Wilmington. That's what he represents. But he was told this years ago, so that's why he goes on a riff. You've met the guys. Look, my dad just turned 99 yesterday. You've met the guys. I met his buddies. All got the Sundowner. Thank God in heaven. We're so lucky that my dad's sharp. But you got the Sundowners. That's what Biden is. I've seen that. I've seen that dozens times. My dad's buddies, right? They can remember back in excruciating detail. You pelletize. You got to pelletize the. There should be in-kind contributions. We're going to talk about. There should be in-kind contributions by ABC for the ambush. I want the lie detector put on how many of those people were independent, not going to vote. All Trump haters. You tell by the glaring, the eyes never lie. Got the mask on, but the eyes, dagger eyes, with Stephanopoulos, Georgie. And you've got, and then the CNN thing. Talk about coach pitch. It's one step up from T-ball.
Wiffle ball.
It's not gonna fly. Trump's gonna dismantle this guy on the debate, but not just that. This whole illegitimate scam they're running. Here's what happened. We started this show in mid-January with Miles Grow. We knew about it in early January. 21st or something, we start with the war room, shifting away from the impeachment. People laughing at us, people mocking us. Democrats, Nancy Pelosi's dancing around in Chinatown, de Blasio, Cuomo, all of them. So nothing to worry about here. The lost month of February is their lost month. We're sitting here banging on the drum every day. Gain of function, ought, right? But no, we got Hatfield. We got
Herd immunity.
Herd mentality, herd immunity. We got guys, people calling in from all over the world. Mainstream media is mocking us. We understand we're always ahead of the curve. We're ahead of the curve on populism, on Brexit, on all of it. We got in the spring, something became quite evident. The mass hysteria that the mainstream media done, because we take this pandemic very seriously, and how to handle it, targeted interventions, the comorbidities, the old age homes, all of that. And the Swedish model versus the UK model versus our model versus India versus Bolsonaro, hydroxy versus therapeutics, prophylactics versus vaccines, all of it, soup to nuts. ICU beds, capacity, go back from day one. And we realize something, the mass hysteria and the low information voters of the left and the emotional voters, or as Raheem Kassam says, all pathos, no logos.
That's right. No ethos.
No ethos. Aristotelian. And here's what they got. They've scared their voters into submission. They're in the rabbit holes. They don't want to come out. They don't want to vote. So now they got to come up with a whole new scheme of things in order to steal an election. Joe Biden right now will be the only way he can win is illegitimate. It's an illegitimate regime. We will never, ever, 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 ever bow down to it.
But
Okay.
at least you know it's going to be really fair because, Twitter's public policy director has just joined Biden's transition team. So the social media...
They don't even hide it. So in the transition team, the Twitter lobbyist, lobbyist joins it. They don't even hide it. They got Dr. Yan. They're ripping her down, but they don't rip down Global Times or any of the Wu Mao Army. They're beating her up every day, every second of the day. Okay, we've got a great guest. He's the CEO of Tripp Scott, powerhouse law firm in Florida. Most importantly, he is one of the smartest election law guys in the country and absolutely a major player in the 2016 Trump victory in Florida. Ed Pozzuoli. Ed, first off, there was some report the other day in the media that somebody at the campaign gave a presentation that said that there's a path here without Arizona and Florida. Now, I'm always for multiple paths, but I just want to put this to bed. As you sit here, Mr. Ed Pozzuoli, is there a path to victory that doesn't include Florida, and where do you think we stand in Florida?
The answer is no. There's no path to victory for Republican nominee Donald Trump or anybody without Florida. So if you're going to assume, Steve, that Donald Trump is going to win New York, then okay, the math works. You don't need Florida. But Florida is a must.
Yeah, Florida is the hill we're going to die on, right? You got to win Florida. Just very simple. He's going to win Florida. And I like to say Florida's a lock, right? Because of the game day votes versus the, all the other votes. Ed, I don't know if you've seen this thing. Before I get to Florida, and here's the games they're playing. And you got to get our audience up to speed on the games. In Pennsylvania, a Democrat 5-2 Supreme Court just ruled, a state Supreme Court just ruled that I think the Green Party's not on the ballot, right?
Green Party is not on the ballot.
So all you Democrats out there that are, I don't hear all your whining about climate change and the Paris Accord and everything like that. You're supporting to try to steal this election. That's what you're doing. You're taking off the Green Party. Look, I'm not a Green Party guy, but Jill Stein, she had some smart stuff to say in 2016.
They did it in Wisconsin, too.
There's Wisconsin. So Democrats, don't sit there and take the high moral ground about climate change and everything like this. You guys are showing your true colors. You forced the Green Party off the ballot. And I hope everybody in Pennsylvania that is one of these climate change guys, don't if you vote Democrat, you're just, all I'm saying, I'm not telling you how to vote. I'm just saying what you're supporting is the people that ripped your choice off of the ballot. You can always, I guess, write it in. But and then they've extended, even worse than that. They got now, and this is what's going to happen, ladies and gentlemen. They got this funky It's supposed to be mailed by midnight and have a post office mark, but if they can't see it, they're going to be drop boxes. Drop box. You don't think there's going to be in Pennsylvania? There's going to be anything in the drop boxes in the greater Philadelphia area? You don't think there's going to be any issues in a drop box? Hey, drop that. Right? They're going to be voting by the pound up in Pennsylvania. They're voting, just bring it back from Fort. So, Ed, tell me about all the games that are being played around the country. There's 200 lawsuits right now from the lawfare. You've got Biden's or Obama's wingman, Eric Holder, right? So tell us about the games that are being played before we start to focus on Florida.
Well, let's just understand something, that the right to vote is absolute. We should protect it. If, assuming you're eligible, you're a citizen, you should have a right to vote. The Democrats seem to be taking the position that your right to vote only is extended and should be protected if you're voting for their candidate. So that's what's happening in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, while they're taking the people's right to vote, say, for the Green Party, it's no longer on the ballot. So realistically, you've just destroyed that person's right to vote.
Unbelievable. And they talk about voter suppression. Let's go to the mechanics of Florida. One is actually, and you shocked our audience the other day. Give us an update of where we stand with, I guess, requests for mail-in ballots. Are they just shipping out ballots everywhere in Florida?
Well, in Florida, we have a statute that covers it, and a voter has to request a ballot to receive a mail-in ballot. In Broward, in Palm Beach, we've had about 850,000 voters request ballots to vote by mail. At that point, the supervisors of those two counties will send out your ballot if you've requested it. You're supposed to vote the ballot and send it back and get it back to the supervisor's office before the close of election on Election Day. And so over history, those who've requested ballots, about 60% of those will be returned and voted.
But that's where the requests have been.
Literally, we're going to start.
Yeah, but let me ask you that's where you request. That's normally 3 to 5%. This math works out to almost 40%. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, it's so like in Broward and Palm Beach, there are 2.2 million registered voters between the two counties.
Okay, and you're saying you vote, and basically it's 70%. Your ratio of voting there is pretty high. It's roughly 70% of the registered voters actually do vote.
75% in the presidential, yes.
And of that 2.2 million, you're saying 850,000 have been ballot requests already?
Yes.
Hey, Ed, can you hang over for the next segment?
Sure.
Okay, hashtag war and pandemic. I want to know, okay, you got 3 things you got to do, and we're so glad of, was it Christopher James yesterday? And we want to hear more. 1, what are you doing to push out the content to the show everywhere? 2, what are you doing to help get out the vote? And look, if you're one of the Democrats that listen to this show, if you're for Biden, go do your thing for Biden. It's a free country. We love participation. And number 3, what are you doing to sign up as an election official for when the war starts? And it's going to be a war. Let's just face it, right? Everything they're saying, they're talking about street fights and massive protests. They shut down cities and all that. Okay, we're going to turn Ed Pozzuoli, one of the top election lawyers in the country, next on War Room.
Seconds.
That means you don't.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
They want to criminalize political speech, and they're not going to shut me down. I'm more focused than ever. We're kicking off a national tour on Monday called The Plot to Steal 2020. They're not going to stop my voice in assisting President Trump and making sure that this election that he's going to win on the 3rd is not stolen from him.
Well, I want to thank Tucker Carlson for giving me the platform last night. This thing blew up, and this is what we've been working on. If you're part of the pandemic family, want to hear #WarRoomPandemic in the live stream, get your voice out there. This is the most important show in the world because we got Lao Beijing, we got the deplorables, we go to millions of people in Australia, millions of people in Europe, and especially want to thank the G News and GTV folks for blowing it out in Mandarin. Also, we're now on in Real America Voice, the rebranding of AmericasVoice.news. Now on a Chicago Comcast Channel 113 and Dish Channel 219, John Frederick Radio Network throughout the nation, and of course, Newsmax TV. We're going to get back to Ed Pozzuoli in a second, but guess what, folks? The hits are going to keep on coming. We've set the framework, and every day we're just going to fill in the content, right, as we drive this thing forward. And here's the great news. The left can't handle people in their face. Okay, because we're going to be in their grill relentlessly, and you're going to start seeing them leaking oil, like Mika, right? Mika leaking oil. She's got those worried eyes, that furrowed brow. Okay, Mr. Raheem Kassam. Before we get Ed Pozzuoli back, you got breaking news.
I wanted to draw to people's attention, if we can get up on screen, the CNN article. The way they framed the Pennsylvania Supreme Court rulings about the drop boxes, about the Green Party, and about the extension on the deadline for absentee ballots. Here's their headline. Pennsylvania Supreme Court election rulings are big wins for Biden. They're not even hiding it anymore.
Big wins. This is stealing votes. Big wins. Okay? Big wins. They're not, they're, it's blatant. This is not conspiracy. They're in your grill. Want to get back to Ed Pozzuoli. So, Ed, walk us through Florida. What's happening? When did they start counting votes? What does this look like? And is this going to be just a total and complete fiasco?
I hope not, Steve. But the actual counting of ballots that came in through mail-in requests start as early as September 24th. So the
September. I thought it was October 19th when we talked the other day. The day of they start. The day of in-state of early voting. You're saying that's shifted now?
Well, it hasn't shifted. They may not count the votes until later, but the bottom line is they're going to start reviewing the envelopes, the returned envelopes from an eligibility standpoint, whether the voter signed it, whether the signature is in question. All of those things will begin to be in front of the canvassing boards as early as next week.
Wow. Well, even before the first debate, we're gonna have people's hands on ballots, right? This is gonna turn out great. This is an outrage. So, Ed, tell us, your guys. I know that lawyers for Trump. You got Pam Bondi. You got so many stars down there in Florida. Please make me feel better. We're gonna have some tough hombres in the room to count because you can't trust these guys. Right, and once they get their mitts on the ballots, you can't trust them. This is what upsets me so much. It's not a secret vote anymore either.
Right.
It's not a secret vote. You're supposed to walk in, close the thing, vote. Right.
Absolutely, and this is one of the problems that we're seeing with the Democrats. Notice whenever they find themselves in a bind, the answer is not to try harder to get out there and convince people of the rectitude of their opinions. It is to change the rules of the game. This is completely un-American. And we're watching a party do this every single day.
This is why Biden, he's illegitimate. Everything they're doing now is just to game it. The legal, the what they're doing with the social media that change the rules, what they're doing with this incitement of mob violence. So, Ed, tell me, walk us through the process. So people start putting their hands on the ballot on the 24th. You actually start counting on the day of early voting, which is 19 October, correct?
So, Steve, think about it this way. You mail in your ballot, and it's in an envelope within an envelope. So it comes in, and they have to begin looking at whether the voter complied with all the mail-in requirements. Is there a signature there? Does the signature match the voter's signature that they have on file, or is it close? Those kind of things. So all of those issues will be in front of the canvassing board before they separate the envelope from the ballot. Once the ballot is separated, at that point, there's no further objections because now it's a ballot without any objection whatsoever because then it's going to get counted. that point. So you've got to make sure you preserve all of your rights up front.
Walk people through how do these lawsuits? You said there's 200, or actually, Bill McGinley said the other day there's already 200 lawsuits throughout the country. Obviously, in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, are actually playing out quite big. I think in Arizona there's a bunch too. What is the lawfare part of this? Why, when they had this announcement the other day that Eric Holder and the Perkins Coie firm was retained, and you've got all these solicitor generals and all these U.S. attorneys and all this, that people go, wow, what is it? This is like a wall of lawyers. Why is that? Why has lawfare become such a big part of an election?
I like the idea that they're supporting lawyers around the country, but I'll be honest, I don't like it at all from an election standpoint. That it should not be decided by the courts. It should not be decided by the lawyers. But, Steve, let me give you a sampling of what happens before an election. There's ballot design questions. There are, as an example, what you saw in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, who's going to be on the ballot, who's going to be first on the ballot. Those kinds of things are all litigated or decided up front. And so there's litigation around that, where ballot boxes will be, the process and counting, et cetera. All of those things that are open, that we used to take good faith, are now being litigated to the T in some respects across the country. After the election, during the voting process and with the supervisor of elections, as well as canvassing boards across the country, and then ultimately certifications that roll up to electing presidential electors. That's when you get into the federal issues about making sure each state has their electors in place in time to vote on the Electoral College come the middle of December.
Given that the complexity in the scale of this, the president's talking 80 million votes. We think it's more in the 60 to 70, but you're talking orders and orders of magnitude more than it was. Do you see a process, given where all the lawsuits are going to be flying, the appellate court stuff, everything, that you'll actually get to a thing of certifying the vote and being able to, on a national basis, state by state, and actually getting the electors voted on, the slate of electors, by December 14th? Because if it's not by December 14th, it automatically kicks to the House of Representatives, right? The new Congress that seats on the 6th.
Yeah, but look, so people need to understand election law is truly governed by state law of each individual state. And so, as an example, in Florida in 2000, a law allowed certain things to happen, recounts, et cetera. All those standards are set up inside of state law. When you begin to have, as what happened in Bush v. Gore, the Florida Supreme Court ruled that the intent of the voter was supreme and ordered a statewide recount after the Democrats tried to cherry pick just the Democratic counties on recounts. But then ultimately, the U.S. Supreme Court stepped in. Why? Because the presidential electors, if Florida's election was not certified by a certain time and their electors were not seated by mid-December, then all of Florida would have been completely disenfranchised, because it would have thrown the presidential the Electoral College off. That becomes a federal issue, and that's where essentially Bush v. Gore, among other things, was ruled on by the U.S. Supreme Court. That's kind of the same process we're still dealing with, although election laws throughout the country have tightened up by way of process and procedure.
Ed, we got to bounce, but just for our audience, people like to get active. We're telling people they got to get engaged. What would be your recommendation to people that listen to the show in the state of Florida and throughout the rest of the country to become an active participant in making sure this goes as close to what the founders felt how it should?
Well, there are two things. One is that they should contact the campaign and get involved. Lawyers, I would ask, Republican lawyers, Trump-supporting lawyers, to contact the campaign and sign up across the country so they can be on the ground, because that's where it's going to happen, on the ground, Steve. It's not going to happen in Washington. at first. So that's the first thing. Second thing is I do think that election supervisors need all the help they can get from people who want to do this the right way. And so volunteers for the supervisor's office in conducting these elections, every supervisor across the country is looking for volunteers who want to do this the right way.
Ed Pozzuoli, can we get your social media so people can follow you? It's a big demand when you come on.
EDPOZZ is that's where I am on Twitter, and look forward to seeing people's responses.
Ed Pozzuoli, thank you very much. Want to make sure we get that Twitter handle up, get it up on in the live stream. Ed, thank you very much. Raheem Kassam, observation.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, brother. Observations of what we've heard so far.
Yeah, I was looking into some of this yesterday, and Ed's absolutely right. As in he's one of the top experts on this. You wonder why. I mean, let me ask you this question: who funded these DA races? These DAs are going to get involved.
George Soros.
Shh. Can't say that. No, but that's the point. I mean, the reason that they don't want a conversation about Soros right now is they know that his sponsored DAs and all those around the country are the people who are going to start getting involved. I gave one example of it yesterday in my monologue on the show, but there are plenty from around the country.
This is that radical DA out in St. Louis with the people trying to defend their house from that mob that was in there. Okay. Yeah. Short commercial break. Hashtag war and pandemic. You're the fulcrum that changes the world, and this is the still point in a turning world. Back.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
The number one issue that we're encountering in these door-to-door encounters, Steve, and we're talking about hundreds of thousands of them in key states, is the economy, and it's not even close. They say the most important issue facing them is getting this economy back to where it was pre-COVID, creating jobs, and restoring American economic greatness. And I think that that is an issue that works to Donald Trump's strength.
We're going to invest in close to $1 trillion over time, in the near time, for infrastructure. We're going to build green infrastructure. For example, I propose that we spend $100 billion on making sure our schools have the right right ventilation, making sure schools, in fact.
Is that it? Do we need the right ventilation because we're pelletizing? This guy, no, this is not right. This is sad. If you're gonna steal it, you got to put something. I mean, this is the El Cid strategy. Just put him up in the saddle, right, and hope the guys on the other side get it. I mean. $100 billion for the ventilation system.
Kamala Harris Sancho Panza?
Yeah, I got to tell you, it's
a weekend of Biden.
This is Sundowners. The Sundowners report $100 billion, and then it's a pause. He's trying to kick in and remember for the ventilation system, right? After he pelletized the droppings.
Well, I'm still curious how they're going to pelletize it. What do? Run it through a bunch of goats and rabbits?
I don't like to mock. I always used to mock Joe Biden. Remember, if you did, House of Cards, the American version of it, that guy in Pennsylvania that played, they modeled him on that doofus on Joe. He sits in the Oval, gets in the thing. Remember the first season of the senator, the governor that went back and ran, and he was the vice president. He was complete brick brain. I mean, Joe Biden is just not a smart guy. Everybody knows it. Kind of been mocked for years. But man, pathetic. Okay, now I want to turn back to the serious nature of this. And look, the central part of that, we started with Ralph Reed. Ralph Reed runs one of the most sophisticated, the Faith and Family Group, one of the most sophisticated groups out there. In fact, I think they're doing their conference down in Atlanta. They're not having it in Washington, D.C., and digitally get it up. We'll link to it, of the faith base. And they're known for doing door knocking. They go door to door knock, or they're doing digital door knocking. I mean, they are get out the vote. That their stock and trade is boots on the ground. And he comes back as an evangelical and says, hey, number one is economy. I go, what was number two? He goes, economy. I go, what was number three? Jobs. I mean, he said, look, everybody's praying, but they're praying for a job, right? So he said, that's the thing. I said, wow, because they've got the targeted list. They're going to, get the Susan B. Anthony people to go out to vote. He says, no. Economy, and my job. Now I want to turn to Jason Trennert from Strategist. He's a strategist. He's I think one of the smartest guys on Wall Street. Look, here's the thing, Jason. You both know the practical of kind of where markets are going, but you also are a big picture guy. Walk me through and make me feel better that I got the Bank of England, right? The Bank of England used to be the guys that were the prime reserve currency until they had a run of World War I and World War II that basically not just destroyed the empire, but also destroyed their economy. And then we took over after Bretton Woods after the war as the prime reserve currency. So now you have the Bank of England, our predecessor, they're talking about negative interest rates for the first time in history, which is something I never like about when you talk about money. I never like to be first. And you've got Brother Powell coming up and saying, I think we're going to keep rates where they are, which is essentially zero, through 2021 or 2022, 2023. Tell our audience at home, we got a lot of guys, clearly because we were ahead of the pandemic and we're ahead of this stealing the election fiasco. We got a lot of desks that listen to us, or at least put the junior guy on it to make sure that he knows what the crazies are saying. What's going on here with money? What's going on here with basically the way the system works?
Well, Steve, I have to tell you that having 0% interest rates or negative interest rates is a very unreliable way of trying to get economic growth. The great irony is that it tends to benefit the wealthiest people more than the average person. So the wealthier people have financial assets. They have stocks, bonds. The average person just might have a savings account, and then they're getting zero. And I think one of the lies that you've seen over the last 11 years is that low rates in and of themselves can solve everything. I think negative interest rates have been a disaster everywhere they've been tried. There's about $15 trillion in negative yielding sovereign debt globally. And if you could show me that it really worked in Japan or it worked in Germany, I would maybe feel more confident about it. The good news is that the Fed, while it's concentrating on keeping rates low, it has stayed very far away from negative interest rates. The U.S., despite some of the policies it's making, is likely to be the reserve currency for the foreseeable future. But if there's one thing we've known about history is that there have been many reserve currencies, and usually you lose the privilege, the exorbitant privilege, doing the same things, which is often spending more money than you have.
Well, look, we're not. And this year, we understand because of the pandemic, you got a huge deficit, but you also have had this $6 trillion bazooka that's hit into the capital markets. We're propping up, every type of credit class, every asset class out there. When you say we're not at negative interest rates, I haven't looked at the quote on the 10-year Treasury, but is it still 60 basis points? I mean, this is pretty close. It may be not negative, but the rates are not just historically low. He's basically said we're going to keep them historically low for years to come. Correct? How do you interpret that?
Yeah, no, listen, I think that he's in a very tough spot because never before have policymakers locked down an entire economy or encouraged people not to engage in commerce. So I don't think he has a lot of great choices here. And as I said, I don't think monetary policy is a very elegant way of getting economic growth. I think the best way to get economic growth is to let free people make their own decisions, to let prices actually dictate capital allocation. Right now, the Fed's not allowing prices in the capital markets to float freely. But by the same token, I have to say they are a little bit of a victim of the fact that there are other decisions being made in the government that make them very, very worried about what would normally be almost depression-like levers of unemployment. So I'm kind of giving the Fed a break here, but I would hate to see this be a persistent feature of our monetary policy.
But before I go on another topic, I mean, didn't he say it's kind of going to be persistent? Didn't he say we're not really changing this till 2022 or 23?
Yeah, he said that. I do think the election.
Look, brother, I feel your pain. I got you on here. Make me feel better, okay? I'm not an expert like you. I just know what I know.
Yeah, no, I think that the good news though is that there is a way out. It's not preordained. If President Trump gets reelected, knowing his economic team, he's going to be very focused on growing his way out of our fiscal problems, which is to lower taxes, to lower capital gains taxes, to provide incentives for companies to build capital. The other side will try to redistribute wealth, which, in my opinion, will make it much harder to get out of our fiscal issues. So the Fed, I guess what I'm getting at is the Fed will have a much easier time exiting this policy, in my opinion, if President Trump wins. If he doesn't, unfortunately, you may be into something that looks a lot like Japan and what people call a Japanification of the economy.
Wow. We've had, okay, I want to go to your letter. You send this letter out that's always very perceptive about capital markets, what's going on. This one was a little broader. Talk to us about this because you actually talked about the pandemic. You talked about where the country is. You talked about lessons learned. Walk us through what you've been telling the people that depend on you for sage advice.
Yeah, well, Steve, you're nice to ask it. I mean, this is something just after 6 months looking at what I've learned, and I think securities prices are kind of a very demanding mistress, which it kind of cuts through a lot of political correctness because you have a scorecard every day, and you don't necessarily have the luxury of debating some of these issues. You know what's happening, and my own particular feeling is that social media and news as entertainment has largely made us dumber and more afraid. There's a real open question, in my opinion, about whether the black swan was the virus or the lockdown of the economy itself, or at least certainly the lockdown of the economy for 6 months and counting. And so there was a lot of that in this piece. And another realization really is that ultimately you don't particularly have free markets, as we were discussing before, when the Fed increases the size of its balance sheet from $4 trillion to $7 trillion. It almost doesn't make any much difference what's happening in the economy. Asset prices are going to move materially higher.
What lessons do you think? You say we're dumber and more afraid. This is why the Democrats, to me, know that they're not going to get their guys out to vote. They've traumatized their base. Look, we've been on this from day one, and we argue all the time about this. But we present both sides of the argument with data, science, evidence. They've traumatized their base. That's why now they're panicked. They're absolutely in a panic mode that they're not going to get people out to vote. So they got to come up with all kind of ways to have election month, so we can keep voting and keep counting until they win. Where do you think we head right now, Jason? Where do you think the next couple of months takes us?
Well, listen, I do agree with Steve Cortez with Ralph Reed as well that the economy is going to have a very big impact. Ultimately, it always does on what the election looks like. And here, the good news is that the third quarter showed a very big bounce. We're probably going to have, the Atlanta Fed has an estimate of maybe 32% growth in GDP in the third quarter to quarter at an annual rate. That's going to be reported 3 days before the election. I think it's October 30th.
Yeah.
So that's going to be something where people are going to look at and they're going to understand that despite this kind of body blow of the lockdown, we're doing a lot of things. The administration's done a lot of things to get the economy back on its feet. But more has to be done. And again, the best way to do that, in my opinion, is not through central planning. It's through allowing the economy to heal itself.
Jason, how do people follow you? How do they follow you on social media? How do they get to your website? How do they find out more about your thinking and your writing?
Yep. So the name of the company is Strategas Research Partners. And that's GAS, if you spell it, Strategas, or you could just look me up, Jason Trennert, and I'm pretty easy to find.
Jason, thank you for joining us today on War and Pandemic.
Thank you, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's called the bid and the asked, okay? And within the bid and the asked, that's reality. You know, Bill Parcells said it best. You are what your record says you are. Cut out the happy. You are what your record says you are. Let's sum it down to one. Let's get it down to a set of math. Your record. The bid in the ass. That's what Jason Trennert is talking about. That's what cuts through everything. The bid in the ass. Deal more with this when we return on War Room Pandemic.
Even Johnny.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Now, on the political scene, one of the Democratic candidates is Senator Joseph Biden. Have you seen the problem he's been having? He went around and made a speech. And apparently, he quoted I think it was a British politician, took his speech and kind of paraphrased it as his own. And then the press got on him. And then he was charged also with taking part of Bobby. And Biden says, not to worry. He reassured his staff. He said, we have nothing to fear but fear itself.
Joe Biden he's so old and he's been around and talking gibberish for so long that Johnny Carson was dunking.
Let's see, that was 88, 98, 2008, 2018. That's 32 years ago. 32 years ago, they're mocking Joe Biden, right? Johnny Carson, the great Johnny Carson.
I wasn't even born yet then.
Yeah, no, 32 years ago. That's years before Johnny Carson punched out, right? That's the height at the top of his game.
I wanted to play the Robin Williams one as well, but it's very sweary.
Yeah, I can imagine.
You know, I was laughing with someone the other day. When you look at Biden's candidacy, someone said to me, I thought it was great. He said it's as if Al Brooks remade The Manchurian Candidate as a dark comedy, right?
Yeah, but here's the thing. You know, back in those days, you could laugh about it and joke about it. And this is not funny. Their process, and they lay it out. And I want to thank Raheem and all the team that have gone through this for months. Bill McGinley. We've talked about this for months. One of the things we could see months ago, they had traumatized their base. This kind of mass hysteria, this psychological warfare. They had overplayed their hand, and you still get it right now. You know, New York City. We were in New York City. I was there for, I think, 10 days, a week, doing the show from there. It is scary, right in Midtown Manhattan, and it's a ghost town. And I was going to do the Fox show the other night, and producer Vish was there. And I said, "Look, we'll just go to the studio. Let's make it easy for them. It's all shut down. They send trucks, everything. All of them are shut down. Everything's shut down. There's no movement. The day after Labor Day, we're supposed to be on fire for the fourth quarter. Crickets. It's not New York City. That's why the CNBC reporter, the report you sent me the other day, Jack, about the perimeter thing. I don't think people know the scale, and that's why Trump, I think, is more important than ever." Right, because of the economic growth and these radical policies. And you get Biden up there, he's talking pelletize and pelletizing the chicken crap and $100 billion for ventilation. Yesterday, the big part I want to get, and we're getting into this in the next hour, he said China's not an opponent. You know, we compete with them, they're not an opponent. Russia's an opponent. You get this old, the 1980s are calling Joe, and they want their national security policy back. They want their foreign policy back. You're a throwback. This is why he's a sundowner. He goes back to that and he thinks Russia's the 10-foot giant. He can talk about the pelletized chicken crap because that's from a day when he was running in Delaware and had to know that stuff. You ask him what he had for lunch, and he's going to have to ask, Jill, hey, what spilled on my bib? It was Gerber's peaches and what? Mass peaches. No, Joe, you had the peas. It's not, but it's not funny.
Through a straw.
It's not through a straw. It's not funny. It's not. Here's why it's not funny. It's obvious what the scam is. He's a cipher. He's just the guy they had to put up there to make sure middle class American suburban. Oh, Joe's a nice guy. Joe's not Trump. Remember, the whole thesis they're running on is not just Orange Man bad. That was old. That's the old thing. It's Orange Man destructive. Orange Man evil. Orange Man, in your personal life. It's Orange Man is the font of all evil. He's the railhead of the patriarchy. He's the railhead of the anti-climate. He's destroying the planet. Yeah. He's destroying your social life. He's destroying everything. He lied about the pandemic. Here's my point. Let's go back to the evidence base. We were on this from the beginning. We saw it all. We could go through step by step. The Democrats were awful. Remember, we were all nativist and racist. You got the China. You guys are all this thing in China. We said, no, it's the Chinese people that are being abused here by the CCP, right? They're the ones in lockdown. They're the ones in quarantine. You saw this quarantine. Hey, they nailed it shut. They nailed the door shut in Wuhan.
Welded
shut in Wuhan. We were there every weekend. Go back to the first area. Go back to the weekends. We did all the China stories where people calling in from there going, you don't understand. This is hell on earth, right? And they're lying about it. It's the Chinese people we're fighting for. We're pulling for the Lao Beijing, old 100 names. So don't give me the nativist stuff. Nancy Pelosi, you mocked it. You're dancing in the streets. Let's go to Chinatown and have 12 people for thing. It's like the Wuhan 40,000. The CCP did the 40,000 person, Lunar New Year dinner, right? You had all these guys. You had de Blasio, you had Cuomo, you had all the politicians mocking the lost February is your lost February. Look at Navarre. He's telling people, hey, I was writing these memos nonstop. They're taking the actions that eventually, and was it perfect? No, it was not perfect, okay? It's not perfect. Why is it not perfect? Because the world's not perfect. It's called a learning curve. You clearly learn. You think things are perfect, go back and look at World War II. Look at North Africa, right? Look at Kazarine Pass. No, we didn't exactly start with a bang down there. But we learned. We're learning the organizing principle of the Judeo-Christian West is that we know how to process data and make changes, right? What do I got?
You got CCP, baby.
What is it? Oh, we're going out? Okay, well, I'm doing my voiceover. I'm stepping on Miles of Stone. Let's go. We're going to be out. We're going to come back with a new episode in just a minute. This is my favorite song. I rock this song. Raheem's thing got like 700 million hits. Be back in a moment.
I'm just stating facts. Tell you how it is. Ain't no way to change if we don't resist. Take from us. That's what and who to love. Swear I finally had enough. It's time to rise above. Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Follow me and I'ma set us free. Take down the CCP. I said, take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Communism's dead to me because it killed our families. The CCP.
这是你我维护正义的必须，这是你我维护正义的必须。
Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Follow me and I'ma set us free.